Back, and I am going to resend out the link as we start up. So we just made it through the intro and dropped out. I apologize. Don't know what happens with these crazy things, but welcome to the show, Kingdom Love Small Town, Small Town Underground. Tonight, this is Monday, our candidate conversation, and tonight we have Mr. Baron Reinhold from Gwinnett County, who is running for sheriff of Gwinnett County. So welcome to the show, Baron. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I am too. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the show over to you first. I want you to tell our audience where you're from, what you're doing, Gwinnett County. Give us some background on you, and then we're going to move from there and tell us about your run for sheriff, sir.
Sure. Well, let's see how far back do I go? I was I was I was born in Rochester, New York. Family moved around a lot as a kid. Landed in Miami when I was in grade school, so first grade actually. So I call Miami home. Graduated from Palmetto High School. Enlisted in the Navy to go to the Naval Academy Prep School in 1985. So I joined under the Reagan Bush 600 ship fleet. Did a year at the prep school. Slogged through that. Picked the lock on the back door of the Naval Academy. Got in
Right.
there. Graduated with a BS in history, and went down to flight school in Pensacola. Finished up down there. Moved down to intermediate flight school out in California, and finished up at Moffett Field. And I got my wings. Went to my first tour out in Hawaii, right at the end of Gulf One.
Okay.
Out there enforcing the oil embargoes. Somalia was hot the first time. We were vectoring intercepts in to take out the warlords' supply chain. Moved on to that. I was an instructor in Jacksonville for the aircraft that I flew, which was a P-3 Orion, and did that for 3 years. Went up to Norfolk. Was on an admiral staff, on a carrier staff, so we certified all of the East Coast carrier battle groups and strike groups to go on deployment. So we would go on the month-long battle exercises and get them ready to go, launch them out. Then went to out to Monterey, Naval Postgraduate School.
Mm-hmm.
Got a master's there right before 9/11. 9/11, I got orders to an amazing squadron. There were only two of them in the nation, and now there's only one.
Really?
Special squadron, so they flew special missions, national tasking. Right after 9/11, they got forward deployed for basically 20 years. So we would just rotate crews through, fly until, basically we weren't allowed to fly them anymore, bring them home, rest them up, replace the crews. So we did that for the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And moved out to our forward headquarters out in 5th Fleet out in Bahrain. Was out there, served out there for a couple of years.
Wow.
Went to U.S. Strategic Command, was in charge of global strike planning there. And then was the deputy's EA for the last year I was there. And I picked up command of our West Coast Special Projects Squadron. So from 2008 to 2010, I went back out pretty much to the desert that whole time, either there or Somalia. We were flying Iraq, Afghanistan, or
Wow.
missions. And then after that, came back to U.S. Strategic Command. That was pretty wild because I went from overland reconnaissance, mostly for special forces, to a nuclear command and control 747, where I was the senior officer there. So
Nuclear control.
Yeah, nuclear command and control.
Wow.
So
Okay.
if there was a nuclear exchange, all of our ground nodes would be gone in about 24 to 30 minutes. So I would be airborne with my crew in that 747 and briefing the president on his nuclear options and then executing his war orders. So that was pretty wild. Every night a different base. We were moving around. Every third week we were on alert, and we had 3 crews. So anyway, that was interesting.
Wow.
Whenever the president would go overseas, we'd be out in the vicinity, and we flew the SecDef overseas whenever he would go. So we had a fleet of 4 of those 747s. Then after that, I was in charge of the entire Navy's. I had a organization that I was in charge of the entire Navy's community management. So 388,000 people in the Navy, all officers, all enlisted. Our job was to make sure that the entire Navy was properly manned over a moving 30-year time frame. So every morning it was a new challenge to make sure we met those criteria. And my final job, which moved me here to Atlanta, in Gwinnett County, where we are. I ran all the Navy ROTC in Atlanta, so I had a Georgia Tech battalion at Kennesaw State and Georgia State. And I had a battalion over at Morehouse College at Clark Atlanta and Spelman. So I prepared all the future naval and Marine Corps officers from those 6 schools. And I also taught the capstone course, which was leadership and ethics.
Wow.
That's a quick 35-year rundown.
Wow. That is a lot. That is a whole lot. So you have been around.
16 moves with the the wife. We're all together, still, which is got married right at the beginning of that journey. 4 adopted kids along the way, and
right.
It's been quite the journey. We retired January 1st of 2020, by the way.
Wow.
So right before the entire world changed,
yes.
The military and the world.
Mm-hmm.
Which we'll probably talk more about this, but that was part of the impetus between me deciding to run for sheriff.
Right. Wow, man, that's an impressive resume you have there. I mean, that's really wild. So, and folks that are just joined, we did drop out. Now, I will tell you this: we've had some weather up here today. We almost had some flash floodings in the area, and so I'm not quite sure why we dropped out. But the last time we had some weather in the area, it was dropping out. So, there's nothing I can do about it. We're just going to keep going as long as we can. So, let me know. Thank you, Georgia Patriot, for joining us. Just let us know that you can hear us and everything's going out, and I'll keep an eye on everything. So so here you are, Gwinnett County, retired in 2020, and I do agree with your assessment. That's where the world sort of stopped, for all of us, and
Yep.
and now we're here in a very pivotal year in what I consider almost the downfall of our American society, right? And you've decided to pick up the torch and run for sheriff, right? Which is the highest elected law of the land, correct?
Correct. It's for every county, it's the senior law enforcement officer in the county, so it's a constitutional position. So if you know the Constitution, which unfortunately very few people do,
Mm-hmm.
You can be a huge power for good and
Right.
and upholding our Constitution, which is summarily being trod upon at every level of government right now.
Mm-hmm.
So the only person really who's standing between the citizens and tyranny is a constitutional sheriff that actually understands their role and will actually fulfill their oath.
Right.
So that's really, really important.
That's very true. I have a friend who was a sheriff deputy in a metropolitan area, and he's a very constitutional person, and he said that, and this is just his assessment, that, he couldn't believe how unconstitutional things went in some of the sheriff's departments in metro areas, and used to tell me stories about it. And I know that we all know what the Constitution is, and a lot of us like you and me have read it, and we kind of study it, but there's an awful lot that people don't know about the Constitution. It's a shame, but that's just the way things are. So I very much believe that the Constitution needs to be embedded in our law enforcement. I think it only makes things stronger. So and that's
It's interesting that you said that, because there's a book right there on my shelf. I don't know if you know who Chris Ann Hall is, but she's a constitutional attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my first orders when I make and get sworn in will be that all of my deputies will be required to take a constitution class, that not that just an academic class, but how it applies to them in their everyday lives.
Right.
Because there are laws out there that are on the books, but they're not constitutional. We've saw executive orders come down that had the force of the executive behind it, but if they if they cross the line of the Constitution, then the sheriff is to make sure that those aren't followed.
Mm-hmm.
So to fulfill your oath as a sheriff, you have to know the Constitution, and you have to be willing to stand up and make sure that hey, that's great, you can do that in San Francisco or New York City,
Mm-hmm.
but you come into Gwinnett County and that's not going to play. I'm protecting my people and ensuring that their liberties aren't trod upon.
Sure. I mean, that's just a society we're living in. I mean, I'm sure you will agree, but it just seems like that our government, our institutions of this nation, they're trying to destroy it. They're trying to take it away. I'm a firm believer that the Constitution stands in the way of this elitist sort of utopian existence that people want. Like if you talk about the World Economic Forum or any of these new world order governmental systems, and it's very hard to do that with an American Constitution. So it seems like we're constantly under attack with our constitutional rights, and then we end up taking them for granted, right? So it's
Well, it's not just taking them for granted. It's, well, I guess in one sense you could say that, but people are so ignorant about what the Constitution says because probably partially because it's been inaccurately taught for probably a century and a half. But again, the reality is that is the law of the land, and your state constitution, reiterates that,
hmm
and a lot of times expounds on certain areas and articulates it even more clearly. But they don't contradict each other.
right,
Is the point. And so when you have the Constitution on your side and you go up against different entities that are trying to push an agenda that's not constitutional, you
mm,
will win.
right,
It can be very painful, but ultimately, at least right now, you'll win. The point of order that really made my decision to run was down in Hillsborough County in Tampa,
hmm
when the mandates came out, the COVID mandates, and you can't, meet for church and this and that. A pastor down there of a 5,000 person church said he's meeting on Sunday, and he was arrested by the Hillsborough County Sheriff. The
mm,
same week that happened, out in Sierra County, New Mexico, a pastor got a call from the state police, and the governor has declared, this emergency, and you can't meet in church. So have it on Sunday. So he went down to the sheriff's, played the voicemail from the state police, and he said, Sheriff, I fully intend to have church on Sunday morning. What are you going to do about it as the senior law enforcement officer in the county? And he's like, well, unless I missed something in the newspaper this morning, no one changed the Constitution.
hmm
So I'm going to come out in front of your church and make sure that no one disturbs you. So there was
right,
this standoff between the state police and the sheriff for a few weeks. And it escalated to the point where the sheriff got word that they were actually going to come and shut the church down. And the
wow,
sheriff had the entire congregation come in an hour early, deputized them all. And when the Stasi came out there,
right,
armed for bear, he walked out there and said, "Hey, I'm having a deputies meeting. Here's all my new deputies that I swore in about 30 minutes ago. If you disturb my meeting, then I'm going to arrest you, and you're going to have to post bond."
absolutely,
So ultimately, it was kind of game, set, match, and they knew that they weren't going to get anywhere with this guy, so they left him alone.
mm,
But the governor fully intended to break that up, and the sheriff said, "Hey, this is not going to go down in my county. I'm not going to let it
right.
happen."
That's a
But
beautiful
he knew the
thing.
Constitution, and he was willing to risk everything to protect his people, and that's what we need.
That's exactly what we need. A lot of people are scared when you use the word deputizing or things like that. Also, I mean, I don't know if you see it, but I've been told a lot that a lot of the money, like for example, people talk about Constitution, Second Amendment, these types of things, but a lot of the money that comes from our government is earmarked in certain ways that they want to push their certain bills and their certain policies, and then they've got this money earmarked, so they kind of put a stranglehold on a lot of the sheriffs, and they say, hey, you need to push this policy or you need to enact this, and if you don't, you're not going to get this money, and it kind of turns into this tug of war where I think a lot of good sheriffs want to do a lot of good, but they're afraid because it's all a money thing, like they're not going to get
Well,
funding.
yeah, like I said, they're cowards. I
hmm
mean, I'm just going to say it. I'll be the fat elephant in the room or whatever. The reality is, you're going to violate your oath if you become beholden to anything except the Constitution. You're violating your oath,
Right.
and that's how the states have summarily um, done harm to our Constitution, because when our nation was formed, the founders, everyone was afraid of a strong national government, and so the states carved out a very, very narrow piece of a wedge that said, okay, federal government, this is what you are authorized to do, and this only, no farther. You're
hmm
allowed to make foreign, declare war. You're allowed to do that. But that list is very short if you look it up. But over the years, what's happened is, especially since we started, collecting taxes, is essentially, our states have abdicated all their authority to the federal government, and all these unelected bureaucrats at all these 2, 3, and 4 letter agencies who make regulations that have force of law, and you go to jail if you dare violate one. But the reality is they weren't elected officials. This is not how our constitutional republic was founded, nor how it's supposed to function. And I mean, you don't have to die on every molehill, but certainly there are molehills that are worth dying for. And, we need to bring that back. People need to understand that we, the people, the capital, I mean, you look at, we, the people is distinct, and we have the authority in this, in the United States. That's how we were set up, but we've got to reclaim that. And we've got the documents to prove it. We just need to stand on that and buck up a little bit.
Right. That's riveting. It's so good to hear the words that you're talking. And I know I've seen you speak 2 or 3 times. I've been following you. I know that you believe in what you're saying, and that is a breath of fresh air. We need more sheriffs on the level of the Constitution, on the level of we the people, and I don't know if you know this, but I'm a bail bondsman. So we own a bail bonding company. Been doing bail bonding for 24 years plus, and so when we talk about these kinds of things, we're talking about the citizens. We're talking about the all citizens, right? Whether, and we mean, criminals have rights, everything has rights, but we're talking about things that are separate from everyday criminal activity as well, like bank robberies or forgeries, these kind of things, which we're going to get into in a minute. But would you agree with me that we're just like the signs of the times are right where we're speaking now? Like this is what's going on all around us. If we don't have sheriffs that are willing to stand up for the people and protect the people and be with the people and do these things, if we don't have in these areas, then we're facing some really dire consequences, especially if we have another pandemic. They talk about the World Health Organization being the sole head honchos. All of these things happen, and we've got to be able to have sheriffs, especially that will stand up together and protect us from all this that's coming our way.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reality is, as passionate as I am about politics at the national level, the deep state is so deep. In order to drain it, you have to have a bottom. There's no bottom. So how do you drain something that doesn't have a bottom? So I have no hope that anything. I mean, it will either be bad or worse. Because I was just up in D.C. at a wedding, and you look around at all these 3-letter agencies that are unelected bureaucrats that are, they decide, okay, I don't like this certain stock that you have on your rifle. So now you're a class 3 felon if you don't either destroy it or get rid of it. That's ridiculous.
It is.
So, and then you look at the state, and our, almost universally, our governors are worthless because they're just part of the problem as far as not, reclaiming the authorities that they have. I mean, you see glimpses of it from time to time. You saw Governor Abbott say, "Hey, I'm taking back 3 square miles of my border. I mean, give me a break." Why didn't he do that 4 years ago? Why didn't if the federal government is not going to stand up and protect our borders,
right,
then your state is one of those borders. Say, listen, I'm protecting my state. You guys can pack sand. And
agreed.
That's what should have happened.
Agreed.
He's got the authority to do that. Okay, if you want to say the federal government, you've got the line and 400 yards back, great. I'll put the barbed wire behind you, and I'll be your backup. But we're not letting anybody beyond. If you want to let them in your 400 yards of our territory, fine,
sure,
they're not coming any further.
Sure, it's funny how these like you're bringing up Greg Abbott, and a lot of us are watching this closely. How it was just this huge sensation, and everybody was on board there at the beginning of this current. I don't want to call it a psyop or anything, but you said the question, like, why weren't we doing this years ago? Like, why are we having such a tug of war in our states and just enforce the laws that are on the books? I mean, that's the real question here. And then these things seem to pop up during election season or during a certain times. It's like, once you get all that information and you're like, were we not doing this all along? It's crazy to me.
It's a huge problem. And going back to what you said before with, the law enforcement academy, I mean, I was military my whole life. And when I got into this, I decided, okay, so I'm going to do this. I've got to go to the, essentially the police academy. So I'm running around with a bunch of 20-year-olds, which is pretty funny at 56, 57.
Right.
But actually I held my own. I was like top 3rd finisher and everything and did well. But
that's good.
Anyway, my wife's whole side of the family is law enforcement. There was a deputy chief of police was her dad, and she had 2 sheriff's deputies. And you look in that whole, you know, how people advance through a normal law enforcement career, and kind of the crown jewel is how many FBI courses or academy, you know, things that you went to.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about that, how crazy that is, because there's phenomenal training, but there's strings attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that they're going to talk about the sovereignty of states and the Constitution and
Right.
the constitutional sheriff, and that, you know, the FBI has no jurisdiction in your county without your permission? They can't execute orders that are, you know, warrants and these other things without you knowing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you know, you're letting your citizens, you know, be, you know, potentially abused if you don't validate those warrants are valid.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they are technically valid, I mean, we saw what happened to, you know, President Trump, and they got, you know, okay, this guy, seriously, you're saying that our president was pissing on Russian hookers, and that was good enough to get a federal judge to sign off to spy on him. I mean, that's insanity.
Oh, it is. Oh, and they've often admitted. I don't know if you saw the new James O'Keefe that just broke up within the last like 24 hours or so, where they admittedly left things out from the president. Of course, they were spying on him, the FISA warrants, all of these things that they could claim were conspiracy theories are out in the open. But it leads me to this question. So here we have things like the FISA scandals with all the Russian collusion, the dossier, all of these things now that are, you know, 100% true, you know, no bones about it. And here we're in Georgia with this Fonnie Willis, this RICO case. It seems like that our judicial system has forgotten about not only the Constitution, but they're almost making a mockery out of the.
Well, it is. It's a joke. I mean, listen. I mean, you're a fool if you don't think that there's at least about a 12 level justice system.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the reality of that is, and again, you know, what I saw in January of 2020 till now, listen, I've spent most of my adult life in all these god awful places around the world and watching the history of mankind play out. So the history of mankind is one tyrant becoming too tyrannical until the people get pissed off so much that they've got nothing to lose, and then they off that guy, and then another tyrant takes over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's human history.
Right.
And our founders knew that. They knew the Bible. They knew the heart of man is desperately wicked. They put in all kinds of things to prevent that wickedness from taking over, not the least of which is the Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
And they, you know, obviously the debates, do we put things in, you know, in as amendments, because then they'll think those are the only. No, you know, we had the whole debate over, no, we have liberty, but no, but we want to spell these things out. Yeah, but if you spell those things out, then people will think that those are their only liberties, and that's just the start. So, you know, there's that whole thing. But again, you know, it's just crazy. I mean, there's a multi-tier justice system. Every culture that has, you know, taken place, you know, it's a fast sled to revolution or civil war.
Right.
And people in America think, this can't happen here. This is America. I'm like, hey, wake the hell up. Look around you the last 3 years. Look at every day in the headlines. And boom. I mean, it's right there in your face. So
right.
You need to wake up, and you need to take this, you know, thing by the horns, and we need to wrestle it to the ground, and we need to take back our country.
Right. You bring up my next point, which is a great segue into this. So we were talking a little bit before the show. I live up here in North Georgia. You know, regionally, it's a mountainous area. It kind of has its own natural borders. We have the battlefield on one side, and you know, we're not an interstate town. All these things, but the area, the further you go into different, you know, south, you're going into the metro Atlanta area. So, which brings me to my point. A lot of people up here seem to be sort of just they're uninterested in what's going on, or we live in this sort of fantasy world. I call it conservative fantasy land, where, you know, even during COVID, you could still go to Walmart in my area and not have a mask on and all these things. But the rest of the world is a lot different. So let's kind of talk. I would like to get into Gwinnett County, where you're at, and you kind of give us the bird's eye view of your where you live and what you're running for sheriff. You know.
Sure. Yeah, Gwinnett County, for those of you who don't know, is a county right outside, essentially outside the Beltway, to the north. It's kind of like a diamond shape outside of the Beltway. Goes up to Lake Lanier a little bit, and kind of spreads its wings out laterally from there. But it's a huge county. There's 1 million people here. It's the most diverse county in Georgia, one of the top 6, I think, in the United States. We've got huge Asian population here. Outside of Korea, it's the largest number of Koreans in any single place. Huge Vietnamese population, huge Hispanic population from all over the place. We've got and then whites and blacks are it's just it's a massive diverse culture, which is great. The issues are, what is any county is only as good as their sheriff, because that's the building block of the county.
Agreed.
So we had a sheriff here for 24 years. His name was Butch Conway. I mean, he was a household name here, and Butch, crushed it for 24 years, and then he retired. And it's actually interesting. You probably read about this. Our current sheriff, Kibo Taylor, went out to the bail bonds companies, which, as you know, need to be licensed by the sheriff. They need to sign off every year.
Yes.
Business in the county. Well, Kibo went out there as a candidate and hit up all the bail bonds companies, said, "Hey, if you don't contribute to my campaign, then I'm going to shut you down when I become sheriff." And right after he became sheriff, he shut down 7 of our bail bonds companies.
Wow.
Okay, so if the sheriff's supposed to be the senior constitutional law enforcement agent in the county, when the Constitution's protecting life, liberty, property, and pursuit of happiness, and one of the first things that you do is shut down 7 people's businesses, which is life, liberty, and property. I mean, it's a gross. He was legally allowed. Did he get away with it? Were there investigations and lawsuits? Yeah,
right.
But there were deals cut, and he never suffered.
Wow, no accountability.
No. So you see that is your senior law enforcement guy, and it's just like everything is just like falling to pieces. The things that he put in place on day one undermined his deputies, and they began leaving en masse starting about a week into his tenure. And we had about 600 deputies and jailers, and we've lost almost 400.
Wow.
Because they won't work for them. And they can't recruit anybody. You hear on the radio all the time, we're recruiting, we're paying bonuses, we're doing this and that. People aren't stupid. Law enforcement, people talk, and they're like, hey, Gwinnett County is not the place to work, at least in the sheriff's office. The police departments and this and that, that's okay.
Right.
But not the sheriff's office, because the guy's a tyrant, and he's, he doesn't care about his deputies at all. I mean, the first 2 things that he did was vow that he would never obey Georgia law.
Okay.
And he said that by saying, I'm not, it's a Georgia law. You're required to figure out the nationality of the people you're checking into your jail. And if he said, if they're an illegal alien, he would not contact federal law enforcement, which is required by law,
right.
Which is the exact same thing that we just saw over in Athens with the Lincoln Riley. That's why she's dead, is because that sheriff over there, again, and the mayor over there, were propagating what do you call it, sanctuary city policies over there.
Exactly.
Which is actually another law that they violated, because there's a law that says as an elected official you can't do anything to encourage a sanctuary city or
right.
county or state. So they violated 2 laws. But anyway, so as he did that, and there's all kinds of people who were on ICE detainer that he let out when ICE was trying to come and pick them up. I was just talked about one of them today. ICE was doing a raid to pick a guy up, and the guy was just in Gwinnett County Jail. Well, when they did the raid, the guy lit an apartment complex on fire and almost killed 20 families. They got out alive, but all their stuff was burned up.
Man.
And it's because but the things that are more egregious even than that are the other things that he did on day one. He did away with what was called the rapid response team. So if a jailer's in there in distress and is about getting ready to get killed or getting maimed, you hit the rapid response, 40 guys come running through and get everything under control again. Well, he did away with that the first day he was sworn in. Didn't even tell the deputies about it. The deputies found out by the inmates whose parents and friends saw it on TV, or they saw it on TV, and they were turning around mocking the deputies, saying, hey, go ahead and hit the button. Nothing is going to happen.
Wow.
And then later on that day, the new leadership came up and cut the patches off, the rapid response team patches off the shoulders of these individuals in front of the inmates. So you talk about undermining one of the girls that's former deputies who's on part of my campaign, she was the 2019 Deputy of the Year. and they begged her to stay on because she did 17, 18 years inside our jails, and she trained all the new deputies and jailers, and they begged her to stay on, continue the training, and then she agreed to for 6 months. After 2 weeks, she left. She said, "There's no way. This is crazy."
Wow.
And since then, the deputy injury rates have skyrocketed. The inmates injury rates skyrocketed. The inmate death rates. We've had more deaths in 3.5 years than Butch Conway had in 24 years.
Wow.
In our jails.
Wow.
It's a humanitarian disaster. Normally, the inmates were let out for about 8 hours a day. Right now they're locked up for 23 hours a day. I mean,
My
who,
God.
who would lock up their
It's like a
their
ticking
animal,
time
their
bomb.
pet in a kennel for 23 hours a day? It's insane.
It
and
is.
these people haven't even been to court, so we don't even know if they're guilty or innocent.
Really?
And they're locked up for 23 hours a day because we're supposed to have 50 people per shift, and we're down to about 20. Now they don't do any. If your parents or friends want to come and visit, they don't do that anymore. They don't have the deputies to support it. It's just absolutely nuts.
That is wild.
It's a disaster. Our jails are a disaster. I mean, he did a bunch of other things on day one, but you just look at that and it's just like, okay.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Why would anybody want to do why would anybody want to weaken your...
Well, he painted his name on the back of every county car in the county. I mean, we were talking hundreds and hundreds of vehicles, Sheriff Thibault Taylor, at taxpayer expense money. And I mean, the guy's just a small man that, wants his name, plastered all over everything. And he's the big man on campus. And, he's running under, I'm the first African-American sheriff of Gwinnett County, and running around, with a paid driver and a paid bodyguard and put in an executive suite bathroom in his office, got a $50,000 a year raise. It's just on and on and on.
Wow.
It's just sick. This guy does not. When Sheriff Conway did a video for me, he nailed it. He said, "Hey, Thibault Taylor is all ego, no public servant, and what we need is a public servant. And the only person qualified," he said, "is me, because I've run, organizations that are massive organizations with massive budgets. And not only that, I've gotten the highest recognition that the Navy has for sustained superior performance for those units. So I know how to run large organizations, and I know how to motivate people, and I know how to train and equip and support people and make the place that they want to serve and they want to excel." So that's what we need. We need to get back to that. I mean, the deputies will come back in mass once, you've got a crappy leader out of there and a good leader in there. People want to serve here. They just won't serve for him.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. That is wild. See, nothing... We don't deal with anything like that up here. We got a pretty solid police force, and things have been pretty good for a long time. So, obviously, all this affects crime, right? So, what are we looking at in Gwinnett County? What are your biggest crimes? What are the things that you're going to be having to focus on when you become sheriff?
Every crime statistic is off the charts. I don't think that there are any of them that are either lateral or let alone down. So, what really needs to happen, especially because Gwinnett County is a weird animal when it comes to how the sheriff's office works. Most sheriff's office in the state and across the country, you've got a patrol division or department of the sheriff's office. Gwinnett County doesn't. We've got jails, security at the courthouse, and executing warrants, and we have county police.
Okay.
So they do what normally would be the patrol, which is, outside the city limits, and through the unincorporated areas of the county.
Right.
So it's even more important that you have a sheriff that can get all the police chiefs together, especially when, essentially one of your divisions is a police department. Bring them in, make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as, okay, this is what law enforcement is going to look like in Gwinnett County, and then make sure that there's enough overlap where we can work together really well, but there's not too much overlap where we're going to, get in each other's business and lose efficiency.
Sure.
So to do that, you obviously have to, you have to work with people. It's a constant, I don't want to say struggle, but it's a constant thing that you got to revisit. And as different things flare up, you have to make sure that those are addressed in different task forces and whatever else that needs to be, there's ebbs and flows with those types of things all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the one thing that nobody's talking about that people need to talk about, especially and military people think about this all the time, is that, hey, we've got 10 million new people in this country, and a large portion of those are military age males, and a portion of those are sleeper cells. So we're going to start seeing crazy attacks and violence that this country's never experienced before.
Amen.
And the time to start thinking about a jet going into the side of the World Trade Center building is not when you see it.
Right.
If you haven't prepared for that, and if you don't have, I mean, this guy shut down the reserve deputy program. I mean, that's insane. Your most
Really?
experienced guys that want to keep training and stay on an unpaid, he shut that whole program down, which
Wow.
is crazy.
Do you
So
think
our most experienced guys, and so anyway, you look at something like this, you need all men on deck and then some. So personally, I would love to see every single person in Gwinnett County, and I'll try to figure out a way to make this happen. I would love to buy a range and cut deals with several different arms manufacturers and actually put range instructors out there that are sheriff's deputies and that teach gun safety, gun proficiency, how to store weapons, how to handle them safely, and then get weapons in the hands of all of our law-abiding citizens.
All right.
Because guess what? Cops and sheriffs are rarely the first responders. We're the second responder.
Exactly.
The first responder, when somebody points a gun at you, is either you pointing a gun back at them and taking care of it, or you calling the cops and hoping you don't die before they get there.
Right.
So,
wow.
We are largely, second responders unless we're observing, some guy pull a gun on somebody else.
Sure.
So we need the entire, I mean, our founding fathers were pretty clear. In order to be a good citizen, you need to be armed. You need to be able to protect your nation. It's your nation.
Absolutely.
And your household.
And you bring up a really good point that a lot of people, I think, are a little scared to admit, is that just as you've said, millions of people are coming into this country illegally. And how on earth could somebody believe that they're not terror cells involved, that there's not people, like you said, military age people? I've read CNN articles in the past and things like, I'm talking about from like more liberal news articles about how the cartels from Mexico will send their groups up into the states just to join the military so that they can get all the training and everything that they need, and they come back down to their countries and they train their folks up by using military training that they learned in the U.S. I mean, this is not some sort of a conspiracy theory we're talking here. And I just think people are so shut off on that. I appreciate you bringing that up because that's the truth. We need to be aware.
Yeah. And I mean, the way I think through things is always, you pray for the best, but you prepare for the worst.
100%.
So again, if the more people that are trained and ready to go and actually in a position, I would also like to explore, being able to deputize, large numbers of people. Because if some kind of a crazy event cooks off and it happens to be in Atlanta, then, we need to support what's going on down there. And, that if we, send our, frontline guys down there, then we leave ourselves exposed, which you don't know if they've got people stationed all around Atlanta that are going to come into your county when everyone's looking at the, the bomb explosion. I mean, in reconnaissance, what I did is aerial reconnaissance. The first thing you teach the new guy is, hey, don't look at the insertion team. You look at the periphery and who's coming in or who's leaving.
Right.
Because, yeah, you do have to, clear the area and the landing zones and this and that. But they are microscopically focused on what the action that's going on right there. But what's really important for their safety is what's going on around.
Yes.
And so it's the same thing. If it's a well-coordinated and well-funded group, then they're going to set off, the diversions, and then they're going to do other things after those responders, or they set off things that that are going to further maim people that are responding to that. So it just depends on what types of problems we run into. But if you're not training for that, then it's going to be it's going to be a worse day than it should.
Now, I agree with you. We have a few commissioners that are running primaries up here, and that was one of their key focuses on is disaster preparedness, which I'm
Right.
I'm
Yeah, I was up
disaster
there for the,
preparedness.
yeah.
Wherever I'm at, that's all I think about, and some people think you're crazy, but then again, it's like, well, I'd rather have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So,
Well, everyone thought Noah was crazy until it started raining. So,
amen.
the bottom line
Right.
is, you prepare and again, you train for the worst case scenario
Mm-hmm.
and you just pray it never comes. But if it comes, guess what? We always kind of joke around with, different people and what their skill sets are. Cause, we say, you better have enough skill sets to make it on the ark. We
Right.
don't need any extra fat. We need, people with know-how.
That's right, man. That is awesome, and I suppose you have to think that way, being sort of a metro county, because you have a lot more people in that area. There's a lot of things going on. We see the growth that's coming out of Atlanta all over the place, and I was just down in Atlanta, over the weekend, and coming from a little small town, and not being down there for a while, and you just like the people everywhere. It's overwhelming, and you're like, oh, I want to get back home, but but I've been around all over, like Douglasville and Guyton and these areas over the last few weeks, and of course we were at the fundraiser together, so
Yeah.
I've got to I kind of get out of my comfort zone out here when I go to these different areas and see just how different that everything really is, and how much more
Well,
busy they
in
are.
the Navy, we wouldn't let people go out in Liberty unless they're in groups of three. So
Hmm.
every time I go out with me and my two best friends, Smith and Weston. So,
Gotcha. There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's see. Um, I mean, what you're talking about is fascinating. I appreciate you bringing it up. I think, where do we need, how do you stand, I guess, so if you get elected, what do you think that you're going to be able to do, or how do you think you're going to be able to handle the recruitment in your area to get them back to the numbers? Are you seeing that you've got people that are willing to stand up and do this? And
oh yeah, I mean, listen, I did a couple of years ago just for fun. I did. My town is Swanee, so I
okay,
just went up there and did the Citizens Police Academy just to
right.
kind of get a little bit of feel what's going on locally.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, the guy that they paired me up with, because they didn't know that I was running for sheriff,
Okay.
or that I was going to. But actually, at that point, I'd already declared, but I didn't let them know that. So anyway, they paired me up with this guy who was formerly a sheriff's deputy for in Gwinnett County. So he worked for 6 months under Butch Conway, and then he worked for about a little less than a year, I think, under our current sheriff, Kibo Taylor. And he just said no. He took a pay cut to
Mm-hmm.
come over here and work in the same county, but for a smaller police department,
Okay.
because he said there's no way I can keep working for this guy.
Mm.
And
Wow.
the reality is money is important, but it's not the most important thing. Now, certainly, my intention is to have the most competitive salaries,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing that's going to get people back is not having a jackass as a boss, and
That's
a
right.
guy who's actually most concerned
Mm-hmm.
about his people. And that includes inmates, that
Mm-hmm.
includes the deputies, that includes the deputies' families, and that includes every citizen in the county. My
Absolutely.
entire life has been dedicated to serving people. I love people and I love serving them.
Right.
And you know, and people, you can't fake that.
Right.
So people respond when they see somebody who's genuinely concerned about them and their family and advocating for them, and concerned about their career,
Mm-hmm.
and training them and equipping them better to do their job, and just and then also just enjoying the fellowship of that camaraderie, that
Mm-hmm.
just like the military brothers in arms. I mean, law enforcement's the same way. It's the same mentality. A very close knit group that
Right.
need support. I mean, the pressures on them are immense,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
we need to take care of each other. And in order to do that, you need to know each other, and you need to spend time with each other and the spouses, and because a lot of times the deputy is not going to say, hey, I've got some issues going on,
Mm-hmm.
but if the spouses are networked together and they're comfortable, they know you and they know that you're going to do what's in their best interest, then you get that information and you can help people that won't help themselves,
Right.
and without it negatively impacting their career. And
Agreed.
so once you break through that and you gain that kind of trust, then I mean, it's that is the type of trust that you need to have the types of organizations that I've run. I've told
Mm-hmm.
my every organization that I've ever been to, I said, listen, I'm the commanding officer, or I'm whatever is my title there, And I said, so because of that, you need to obey me. But I don't expect you to respect me. I was like, I'm going to earn your respect. But for right now, you just need to obey what I'm saying. And I was like, even that, um, the thing that all of my organizations are known for is, listen, I hire the best and brightest people, and I get them in the room, and I have them develop the plans, and then they brief me on the plans, and then I give them the okay, go forth and kick butt, and it's their plan. So they're executing their plan they put together. They're the closest to the problem. They don't need somebody above them, who's the smartest guy in the room saying, "Oh no, we got to do it this way."
Right.
That rarely works, and so anyway, people love having that type of autonomy, getting the blessing, and then being able to, not be micromanaged, and then just coming back for resources, or, whatever your level is. Now you can blow up the roadblocks that are hindering them so that they can execute their mission.
Wow.
So those are the types of things where just people love, and that will pull like a magnet. I mean, there's going to be a ton of people that come back right when he leaves just because they want to work here,
Right.
regardless of if they anything that I've put in place yet. But we will quickly regain the reputation that we had, which was sheriffs used to send their deputies to our jail, which is one of the biggest in the country, to learn how to do it right. Now we're a freaking laughing stock of this state. And it's not the deputy's fault. It's the sheriff's fault.
It almost seems like it's been planned.
And his failed policies have destroyed, this organization that was the award-winning organization 3.5 years ago.
Yeah. It's a head scratcher. It's so funny the things you mention. It's like, how can somebody do those types of things? How can they dismantle a system, a perfectly good system like that? I mean, like, are they being? Is there a motive behind that? It's crazy to me because we just don't deal with these kinds of things where I'm at, and it's wild. It's wild to think about. So how can people get in touch with you? How can they help support you? We want to put links up. What's the best way to help you out?
We just had a brand new refresh of our website. So every day we're putting videos up there. It's baronforgwinnett.com.
Okay.
My Gmail is Baron for Gwinnett, spelled FOR, Baron for Gwinnett at gmail.com. Our Twitter, our Facebook, Twitter, because it's a shorter number of characters, it's the number 4. So Baron, the number 4 Gwinnett. Same thing with Facebook.
Gotcha.
And everything is on there. I mean, we're putting out videos constantly. We're actually one of the most requested ones. We have this phenomenal program here called the Jail Dogs program.
Okay.
So we had dogs that would otherwise be euthanized would be brought into the jails and be assigned to inmates who have, as a reward, and they would train these dogs. They would be in the cells with them. They would train them, do all this kind of, and then those dogs would be adopted out. And there was not 1 cent of taxpayer money in there. The mental health aspects of these things were off the charts. For the inmates, you're giving them interaction with these animals. You're giving them success. They're earning success. How they were passionate. The jailers loved it because it made people. Everybody wanted to be a piece of that, and everybody wanted to be in that jail dog program. The inmates did. So there was all kinds of people behaving well so that they could get into that.
Wow.
And it was just a stress reliever all the way around. Didn't cost the taxpayers a cent. Our current sheriff dismantled that program and just did away with it.
Oh my God.
So it's just like really, we've got people locked up for 23 hours a day, and you're going to dismantle the one outlet that these people have to keep their sanity.
Absolutely.
And it's just the guy's just. I mean, he's just a bad actor.
Well,
he needs to be replaced.
From what I can hear, and I'm not in Gwinnett County, but I know a lot of people are supporting you, and your message is getting out. So let's hope that it gets out to all of Gwinnett County. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do some comments. We have had a few comments.
Sure.
So Georgia Patriot, it was good that you've been hanging out with us. The first live stream, all right, as soon as I'm blaming it on the weather, but we're up here, and I'll fix everything else. But we are going good now. It says 2 hardworking patriots right here. I appreciate that. We were loud and clear. Thank you for that. It says Our Constitution is under direct attack from enemies domestic. Well,
Yep.
absolutely. So,
Yeah, I
George.
mean, it's crazy. I spent 35 years protecting our Constitution against all enemies foreign,
Hmm.
thinking that 35 years was enough. And, about 14 seconds after I retire, it's like, you got to be freaking kidding me. I can't
Right.
go to church this Sunday. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the rest of my life is going to be, dedicated to protecting it against all enemies domestic.
Sure, sure. I'm the same way. I mean, like I don't. People ask me like, I had people that they said, "Well, why are you interviewing the Gwinnett County Sheriff?" And I'm like, "Well, for number one, everybody needs to hear him and what he stands for and what he's talking about. But number two, I said, you don't think that what happens down in Gwinnett County, Georgia, will not affect you up here in Whitfield or Walker or any other county? I was like, we have got to focus on the entire state, the entire
Yeah.
country together. We've got to. There's no time left to not be supporting people like you and other
Well,
constitutional sheriffs.
I didn't finish that thought earlier. I talked about the federal government and the state government.
Hmm.
What I didn't talk about is, you know, the one thing in my mind. I mean, I'm a Bible believing Christian. I mean, I believe God is executing His will perfectly. I don't
Hmm.
know if His will is to let us continue to slide off the continental shelf,
Hmm.
which I hope it's not. That we're not going by the way of Rome. But my goal was to put myself in a position to be used, because
Right.
throughout history, it's oftentimes come down to one individual or one family or one group willing to be obedient.
Right.
And if you think about the role of a constitutional sheriff, and which is what we are supposed to be, if you had a constitutional sheriffs networked across the country,
Hmm.
and say, just like in the American Revolution, most historians believe that there was about a third of the people that were pro revolution, about a third of the people that were neutral, and about a third that were pro crown.
Hmm.
But if we had, say, just use those same numbers, if you had a third of the sheriffs in the country that actually wouldn't allow the Constitution to be violated in their country, and let's say it's a third of the people, they presided over 100 million people. Guess what? Guess what's not going to be happening? 100
Exactly.
million people, and guess what? It's going to give backbone to the other sheriffs that are like, okay, these guys are doing it right, and our
Hmm.
citizens are at risk, and we could really actually take back the we the people piece of this. I mean,
Yes.
our founders, said, I'll paraphrase it here, but essentially, when the people fear the government, that ain't good. And when the government fears the people, liberty is abound. So,
Exactly.
right now, everybody fears the government because they destroy people. You look at
Yep.
the president, you look at like General Flynn, you look at all these people that have just been completely destroyed by, the bankrupted by,
Hmm.
falsehoods and by entrapment and all this other stuff. And it's a disgrace.
It really is. Yeah, 100%. And that's exactly the point. We need constitutional sheriffs all over the place because the more leadership that we can get that's representing the people, that's representing the Constitution, doing the right thing for the people, the more people will stand up. The more I mean, we can save the downward spiral that we're involved in. So,
Yep, that's what I'm praying for.
100%. So, let's see here. Georgia Page says strong constitutional officers are badly needed. Agreed. It says governor overreach is not just about the Bill of Rights. Articles 1 through 3 are being treated as if they don't exist. Amen to that. Naha, it's good to see you this evening. It says the points being addressed are the reason I've decided my local vote. Every county needs a constitutional sheriff. So,
Boom.
agreed, agreed. Georgia Patriot says Americans have become addicted to security over liberty. Liberty is too much work for most folks. So, I could
Well,
agree.
that's true, but and the whole point is, we're what Reagan said it. We're one generation away from losing it at any given time.
Yes.
And Americans are just so used to beer and football that they don't pay attention to anything else.
Yep.
And I like I said, I've spent most of my adult life in the hellholes of the world and seen what happens to countries that continue down the road that we're on right now.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
not pretty. When
No.
I mean, it's not good.
No, the culture is breeding bread and circus, and the technology has got people's minds completely preoccupied, and that's why we're here fighting against it. It's wild. Georgia Patriot says, federal officers have authority over federal employees, federal agencies, and federal lands. So, Jan Ellis Weaver says, if you prepare, you are an asset. If you don't, you are a liability. That I do
I thought she
like.
was going to continue with the ass theme there, but
Yeah, right. Hey, that's true. Georgia Patriot says, I know when I stayed at the Gwinnett County Jail years ago, it was exceptionally well run. So,
yeah, I mean, listen, this is
yeah.
tragic, but the reality is very true. I've gotten calls and had long conversations and actually invited a couple of my meet and greets, inmates' parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had them come up to me and tell me exactly what their experience is.
Mm.
And it's heartbreaking. These people are going through the worst times in their lives. Maybe they made a stupid decision, and they're trying to help their child or their father or mother, retool and make they're locked up like a freaking, not even an animal. They're just
Mm-hmm.
locked in these horrid conditions, and it's
Yeah.
just disgraceful. We should not do this.
Right. This is wild, man. All right, Georgia Patriot says, fantastic message, Mr. Reinhold. If I was buried in Gwinnett, you would have all of my votes. Sarcasm intended. So, yeah, we've got quite an election
we're part
coming
of
up.
2,000 mules right down here, so
There
pretty
you
sure
go.
you can mail order, straight from China. As many, you know,
Yep.
that's a joke. You got to
Yeah.
clarify because some of the guys at the NSA get a little excited when you start talking.
Oh, yes, I understand that. Hey, we've got one hell of a year coming at us, Baron. I'm going to take this time now to give you the floor. I want you to just talk directly to the people, tell them what you want them to know, and then we'll move on.
Well, let me grab this book.
Sure.
So, what I would recommend, I've probably read this book at least once a month
Okay.
over the past year. Sovereign Duty. This is by Chrisanne Hall. She's got a ton of videos out on YouTube. She's got a paid website that I support. There's all kinds of videos on there that just talk about our history, that talk about the Constitution, that talk about specific courses, like 3-hour-long courses that she gives to law enforcement. It's absolutely, it's a paradigm shift because going back and studying history and what we have and where we are now is, you have to know that. You have to equip yourself with knowledge. Otherwise, you can't recognize that, okay, you're in a boiling stew and you don't have much longer.
Yes.
When you read history and understand the authorities and the power that you actually have, then that gives you the wisdom to climb out of the pot and to turn off the freaking stove.
Yep.
So, you gotta, seriously, take, even if you don't like reading, that book is a fast read. I mean, these are big words. There's not scratch and sniff, but it's not, I mean, it's a 180-page book.
Gotcha.
The videos, if you prefer videos, they're just as, they're just phenomenal.
Okay.
And just get smart on this stuff and encourage your neighbors. I mean, hey, I like drinking beer. So instead of watching football or get on before or after football, watch one of these videos for 40
Absolutely.
minutes and, get smart and talk about it.
Yep.
You guys will, I mean, it's amazing conversation. Our history is, we are the only nation on the planet that has ever done this, that hasn't perpetuated the tyrant getting out over his skis and getting whacked and another tyrant taking over. We've had, this 250-ish year experiment going, and we're losing it.
Yes, we are.
It's the most prosperous, the most wealthy, and most amazing experiment that's ever happened, but it won't last.
No, not at this rate.
It takes effort on people's parts. Otherwise, the weeds and the tares and the wheat grow up together. And if we don't find a way to separate that, then it's going to be a bad day.
That's
So,
right. And
I
the
would encourage
local.
people to get smart and to engage, to make sure. I mean, Chris Ann's got this whole checklist of. And so does Sheriff Mack. I think it's actually Sheriff Mack. He's like, hey, these are the questions you need to be asking your sheriffs that are running for office.
Yes.
To see if they're the person that you actually should be putting into office.
Right.
Because like at the end of the day, that's the last person. There's another good book. Let me grab this.
Exactly. The sheriff is the line of defense.
This book is insane. It's even smaller. Yeah, it's only probably 100 pages. But it's called The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrate, and it talks about the history. it says the proper resistance to tyranny and a republic of unlimited obedience to civil government. So
Right.
basically, it's talking about the last person standing between you and somebody violating your constitutional rights is your sheriff. So
Right.
that is the most important person if you are rightly thinking, to be focused on.
Agreed.
Because a lot of stuff happens in DC and a lot of stuff happens in the state, but in your county,
Right.
when you pick up the phone, that's the person that is going to be, where the rubber meets the road. And if you got the wrong person in there, then you've got to be making those decisions.
Right.
What am I going to allow to have happen to me in my household?
Exactly.
And you've got no protection.
And to be quite honest, if you don't have a strong sheriff in there, then they're not even going to be able to. They're not even going to be able to protect anything that comes their way. And most of your law enforcement are just going to jump and run and go with you with the families anyway. If you're not have the plans in place, I mean, so it's a no-win situation that we're living in. So, wow. Well, man, I appreciate it. We're still there on live. Everything went well despite the beginning. Baron, I wish you luck, sir. We will be keeping our eye on you. I hope to speak to you again further down the line as the primary going into November. And if there's anything we can do for you up here in North Georgia, you just let us know, brother.
Well, if you know any billionaires.
Yep. Trust me, I'm looking. If
when I ended up
Yeah.
running, I actually talked to Butch Conway a number of times. He said, "Baron, don't even get in the race if you're not independently wealthy, or if you don't think you can raise between $300,000 and $500,000, because that's what it's going to take to win the race." And Gwinnett, so I was like, "All right, well, I'm not independently wealthy, so
Right.
Plan B, I need to really work on."
Yeah, and
But we're doing
I
good.
disagree with him too. What we're doing here, what we're all doing in the grassroots right now, the people that we're getting elected and the waves that we're making disproves every bit of that. You don't have to have
Well,
that. You know.
that's actually true with volunteers, and the bottom line is the money only translates into votes if you get the truth out there.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of ways to get truth out there, and which this is one of them.
That's right.
Which is a great service to the people. So, if people, because the media is completely protecting this guy.
Yes.
I've had friends that have gone to the main media with documents signed by the sheriff, and they won't go with it.
Of course. Of course.
So translating into votes, you're right. Grassroots does make a massive change. But, buying billboards, if you want to put something up so people can actually, put
Oh,
a face in
yes.
it, or those kinds of things. All those things are, big bucks. And,
Yeah. Make no
so
mistake,
for the
you will
low
need the money.
information voter, which is most of the people, putting a name and a face together could be the difference between getting a vote and not getting a vote.
Well, that's true, brother. Hey, I will send any billionaires that I can come up with your way, because we all need them. I always joke every time I'm doing this live. I say, if I could just win the lottery, then I can have somebody helping me with all this stuff, and we would never drop out. But
I'm blessed because I've got people that are just, they're working 16, 18 hours a day, actually some more than that.
oh, your
And they are
campaign
phenomenal.
manager, Laura, she's a phenomenal
beast.
person. Yes, she is all over the place. I had the pleasure of meeting her. She's such a sweet lady, and she is tirelessly working for you up there. That says a lot. So
Yeah, I've got a team of folks like that. We're the only, people running for office that, our early elections started on Monday, and we've been at all of our polling places, waving signs, talking to people, and which has actually been a lot of fun. But we joke about night ops. We have these night crews that go around and either replace signs or put up new ones, and
Right.
do all kinds of crazy stuff. But we're having fun, and
that's good.
we're working our butts off.
And no matter what, you're making a difference, man. You're making a difference. That's a huge thing. So we appreciate your service, and we appreciate you standing up and running for sheriff. And we hope and pray that you will be the future sheriff of Gwinnett County, sir.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, and thank you for spending your evening with me. And thank y'all, everybody that was attending and doing comments. Blake Ellsbury will be with me on Wednesday. We may have a special guest tomorrow night. We're still working on it. And we'll just continue this up at least through the 15th to get all these candidates out here. And it's up to you to share. It's up to you to go check out Baron's links and support him. Give him some money. Give him some donations. Anything you can do to support him in Gwinnett County, even if he's not your sheriff, he's the sheriff that we need all over the place. And so we thank you again. And Baron, you have a good evening. And folks, I'll see you again either tomorrow night or Wednesday.